Okay, so welcome to video number 1 for our topic on socialization here. And so this first video, we're going to look at, as always, defining what socialization is and why it's important. And similar to the online reading that you have in the text, I'm going to use the example of gender socialization just to further enhance our definition here. Okay, and why is socialization important? Socialization is the process by which people learn to become members of a particular society. For every individual, this process starts at birth and continues throughout your entire life. And technically, you're being socialized up until your passing and your death. This process involves the acquisition of two things. It involves the acquisition of, let me grab a pen here, includes the acquisition of the physical, mental, and social skills that are needed for survival in that particular society. And if this sounds familiar, good. This is essentially the culture. So the process of socialization involves the acquisition and the learning of the culture of the society in which you're born into. It also includes the acquisition of a personality, a self-identity, a sense of who you are as an individual within this society here. Social experiences the social experiences that we have is the foundation of our personality. And personality, just a general definition of that, is it's a person's fairly consistent patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting. And so we build a personality by internalizing our social surroundings. And as our personality develops, we participate in a culture while remaining, in some respects, distinct and unique individuals. So the two major accomplishments of socialization, therefore, are the development and internalization of social expectations and connection to others via common language and values, and a internalization and creation of a self-concept or the self. Through socialization, a helpless infant is gradually transformed into a more or less knowledgeable, more or less cooperative member of society. In this definition of socialization, the interaction is key. Social structures like the family, education, media, they help to shape us, but we're continuously modifying social structures. In effect, we negotiate our social roles to some extent rather than either creating them outright from the scratch, because no one has to do that, but we also don't, blindly and obediently follow everything that's, we're taught about our society and our culture in that way. So this aligns with what Little in the online textbook talks about. And again, I like everything that Little talks about in this book and in this particular section in particular. I like this part here where he defines socialization as being critical to both individuals, because it's how we develop who we are as really cool and unique individuals, but is also critical to society, the society in which they live. In this way, the individual is intertwined with their social world and therefore with others in that society. This is through first teaching culture to new members that a society perpetuates and continues itself. Socialization, he goes on to say down here, socialization is just as essential to the individual. Social interaction provides the means by which people gradually become able to see themselves through the eyes of others, learning who they are and how they fit into the world around them. In addition, where it says, oh, here we go. In addition, no, now I've lost my place. In addition to function successfully in society, people have to learn the basics of their culture, everything from how to dress themselves to what is suitable attire for specific occasions, from when to sleep, to what to sleep on and from what is considered appropriate to eat for dinner and how to use that stove to prepare it. So nice definition, quick definition of socialization. Further in this topic, we'll explore different aspects of it. But your textbook, and I'll do it the same, will take a specific look at the socialization into one really specific aspect of social life, and that is gender within uh, yeah, and how we get socialized into, again, not only those cultural expectations about what gender is and the meaning and rules for people based upon gender, but also how people internalize all of that into their own sense of a gender identity here. And I'm really glad, just a side note, I'm really glad that Little uses gender socialization here. One of the classes that I teach at Red Deer Polytechnic is often the sociology of gender class. So I've got more than enough content on this. So I'm happy to bring some of this to you. I will note this is information that usually you would see in a second or a third year course. You're lucky you get it here in your intro to sociology class. So you'll be superstars if you go on and take our sociology of gender class. All right, so gender socialization is, you just take that broader definition of socialization and just kind of add gender into it. So gender socialization is a process by which individuals learn the culturally expected behavior associated with femininity and masculinity and the internalization of gendered rules, which then forms the basis of our own gender identity, which is like who you see yourself as. Do you see yourself as masculine or feminine or combination or a little bit of this, a little bit of that, as well as the learning, the knowledge and the information of what is expected of men and women within our culture, within our society. Now, there are a couple of different theories that help to lay out and explain kind of the socialization process. Ultimately, socialization is a learning theory. And so there's a lot of theories out there that, really explain how we come to learn things and really everything. And in this case, how we learn about gender within our society. So we'll look at the social learning theory here. Social learning theory argues that we learn gender through observation and interaction. Specifically, we learn through the processes of modeling and reinforcement. So we learn by watching other people and observing how they are, how they're sort of sending us and teaching us messages about gender, masculinity, femininity, and then practicing that and getting rewarded or punished for how well we use that information in our own interactions with others. So when a behavior, and we model behavior, and when that behavior that you're modeling, is consistently followed by rewards or positive reinforcement, that means that behavior is likely going to occur again. Because why not? You're getting rewarded for it, or it's a very positive experience. On the other hand, when in modeling and interactions that you have, that behavior is followed by punishment, it's less likely that behavior will occur again because we tend to want to avoid punishment or negative reinforcements. So the reinforcement and modeling go hand in hand. In this case, children are going to be rewarded for imitating or modeling some behaviors and not rewarded for others. And reinforcement in this way can also be direct and indirect, subtle or very overt and clear. So back to gender socialization here, children are going to acquire, not only the knowledge about gender, but also acquire their gender identities by being rewarded for gender appropriate behavior and punished for gender inappropriate behavior by those people who are part of their socialization process. So, for example, boys are often told what they should not do rather than what they should do. So, boys don't cry. boys, that's kind of the biggest one here. Boys, can't be weak, and don't be weak, don't cry. And so this is part of the socialization into masculine identity, is that, the use of negative reinforcement and sanctions in that way. Some sociologists note, because boys are often told what they should not do rather than on what they should do, the boy, the script for being a boy in our society is not as flexible as it is for being a girl or being feminine. This, some sociologists say, makes socialization difficult for boy children, and it may explain why males express more insecurity about their gender identity, because it is often more that negative, socialization. So there's one theory. Another theory, sociological theory, is the gender schema theory. And the gender schema theory begins with the concept of schemas. A schema is a cognitive structure. It's a thinking kind of tool we use. And it essentially is kind of like a system of file folders that we create in our brain when when we get new information, and we kind of, process information, and we make create networks of associations between different pieces of information. And that helps us to organize our understanding and perception of our social world. So schemas are essentially file folders that help us to organize incoming information and perceptions from the outside world. They serve as a kind of sorting and organizing function, and where we kind of sort information. Say we get some new information, and we put it into a file folder that we think that fits with other information in that file folder, and then file folders are often connected to other file folders, and so on. So there's very complicated ways in which information and files are all interconnected, and the schemas are all interconnected. So, for example, children will create, a schema or a file folder about what a mother is, and it's made up of, information that they come to learn as they're growing up about what their mother is, and what their mother does and says and wears, and what they look like and how they behave. And so the children will create this file folder of what mother is, and have a whole bunch of characteristics of what they've observed, in their life so far. And then when they start to encounter other mothers and other people that might be defined as mothers, they start to pay more attention to the mothers that they see line up with the qualities that they already know are associated with mother, according to their file folder schema system. And they might not, if they encounter a mother that maybe they're told this is a mother, but it doesn't fit with their characteristics, they're less likely to see that person and define that person as a mother as well. And they may put it into a deviant, a file folder in that way. So in this way, schemas become lenses that shape the way in which we see the world. So the gender schema theory says that rather than rose-colored glasses, we actually all live with gender-colored glasses that leads us to see the world in some very specifically gendered way. Socialization, therefore, occurs as children assimilate their self-concept into their gender schema. Children learn the content of their particular society's gender schema. When they begin to think of themselves as masculine or feminine, or probably more likely boy or girl, that particular gender schema then starts to become associated with their own sense of identity. They learn that when they're picking behaviors and ways of thinking and looking and so on, that they should limit themselves to the particular subset of behaviors and attitudes appropriate with their own gender. And so this is, let's see, where do we go on next here? So one other theory, and we've already touched on this. This is a way of applying and really specifically using the dramaturgical analysis we were introduced with in the social interaction chapter. And another theory I want to sort of introduce you to, and it's looking at gender as an interaction. And actually, there's a theory, essentially, it's just called doing gender, and that we do our gender, we perform our gender. And it's a theory that allows us to understand how we actively do gender, perform gender in everyday interactions with other people. So this includes how we perform, evaluate, and imagine ourselves and others as gendered persons while engaging in ordinary activities and embedded in repeated social scenes. So there's a little formula that kind of goes on to explain this part of the gender socialization process through particular interactions, and it's kind of a it's not really a formula. It's kind of a series of steps. That's a better way to word it. So it starts with let's see. Do I have a slide here? Sorry, I can't see my next slides here. So this process of doing gender starts with a statement, in that a person makes a statement about I am, and we'll use the example given the images I have here, I am a woman. And so so this is their performance, their gender performance, their front stage performance. So if our example here, a woman feels she is a woman, she identifies as a woman, so she's going to dress how she thinks, according to her gender schema, how she thinks a woman should dress. So wearing skirts, for example, high heels, wearing her hair in a certain way. So as she goes out into the social world, this is her statement: I am a woman. And then she's going to start to interact with people. And even if she doesn't talk to people, or if the interaction is really fleeting, other people, audience members, are going to be viewing her performance of gender in this way. And what this theory calls this is reading. So other people watching, in this case, this woman, say, walking down the street even, they're going to read her performance and look at her props and the symbols and the meanings and all that, and observe this particular performance or this statement. And then what they're going to do, because again, we're all judgy people, and we're going to put her into a box. We're going to, what this theory calls, attribute a gender to her. We're going to make a gender attribution in this case. And so the audience members, in this case, the people reading this performance, given what they have been socialized to understand what a woman is versus what a man is, they're going to put her into the gender box that they think she belongs, given the statement that they have read there. And then finally, we haven't even gotten to an interaction between our person doing gender and the audience here, but this then informs any interactions that that person has with another person. And so as a result of the gender, we'll go back a step here, as a result of the gender attribution process, and this is all of that social interaction information we had last topic, this is going to determine anyone interacting with our actor here, it'll give them a sense of, okay, she's female, this is the female status, I know that women should act this way, that means I should act this way because I'm whatever gender in that particular case. So that's attribution then will determine the particular interaction, and then give rise to whatever will then follow from that interaction. So in this particular case, and it was really hard for me to find some exact pictures here, but in our example of, let's just keep it, I'll just go back a slide so it's easier. So in this little example, say we had three men observing a woman walking in front of them down the street, for example. They associate her, attribute her gender as female. Then that maybe then determines that, well, maybe they smile at her because they're male and she's female, and that's what men and women do. They might flirt with her. If they don't like aspects of of her performance. So maybe, yes, she's female, but she's not really dressed well and or whatever, then they might say something negative toward her. So that attribution and how their assessment of how well she's performing her role is going to determine positive or negative interactions that follow. So in all, this is what's referred to as doing gender. And in this particular case, and going back to our general concept of gender, gender socialization, gender identity, so that sense of self, that personality, that sense of self that one feels, in this case, whether they feel feminine or masculine, that's what's going to feed into that statement that they're going to be making at the start of their performance. And what we're reading, and our audience members or anyone seeing that person, what they're reading is that person's performance of their gendered identity. And in order, let's see, oh, not yet. In order for our gendered expressions or expressions of gender or identity to be validated, someone has to notice them. And sociologists of gender have turned increasing attention to the body as a site for making claims of identity. And that makes sense because that's what people see when we're out in public and front stage and that sort of thing. So this is where we can actually bring back in that dramaturgical analysis from Irving Goffman as very helpful to sort of play this out in this example here. Remember, Irving Goffman used the analogy of the theater to explore ways people interact. He developed this dramaturgical analysis by which he meant that social life is like a drama or a comedy or an action flick, on a stage, whatever you want and prefer there. So just a little, quickly, and I'm going to take gender out of it here for a second. So again, we have the statement is the actor on a stage making certain actions and performances. The audience reads and watches that particular performance, and knowing what they know about the script and the story and how people should be acting, as well as what is good acting versus bad acting. They then and so that's the attribution part. So given how a certain actor is performing or looking like, or the things that they're saying, they say, oh, well, that person's playing this role and this person's playing this role. And then judging that performance, means that if the actor does a really good job, the reply part is via positive reinforcement and a positive, sort of response in that person or in that particular way. If the person does a really bad job or the audience is confused in any way what's going on, then that reply is going to be very negative in this particular way. So as I sort of noted here, gender determines the role to be played and what others are expecting of us to play. Society provides that script. What it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman in our society, that's the script. And then the actor then is going to add props and mannerisms and appearance and costumes in that particular performance there in that way. Okay, so like that example, hopefully you find that helpful. Yeah, we'll go on to the next video here.